Hello, I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show. Someone just pointed out, Sean, that I had listed that we were doing the drawing. We have not. We stopped doing the drawing that day, the day of the 400th show. But Sean, I think I'll add you to the list of people that are going to get a sticker. We got the stickers, so hopefully in the next couple of days we'll start shipping stuff out, the prizes and everybody that registered to get a sticker. So that's what I do here. We show films, we fight off YouTube copyright claims, and we mail out swag. That's AV Geeks. So that last film that we watched was part of the Cornet collection. Beautiful Kodachrome footage from the film How to Judge Facts. And somewhere I think I have a black and white or a faded copy of that. So maybe someday I'll marry the two and we'll have beautiful color and sound in sync. Or maybe I'll find the soundtrack to it. So that'll be great. This next film is McGraw-Hill. And it's pretty interesting. It's about cooperation, competition, and conflict. And it talks about it on different levels, personal levels and higher. Really kind of fascinating film. Enjoy.
In all human societies on Earth, cooperation, competition, and conflict take place from primitive cultures to highly complex civilizations, in rural areas, in large cities, and in an average-sized American town such as this one. These three processes are involved in all social interaction. They are occurring here simultaneously every second of the day. On this street, there are stores, markets, offices. They're owned by people who are in competition for customers and for money. Some competition is latent or even unconscious. Some is quite open or overt. The town's oldest butcher shop is losing business because across the street, a new supermarket is attracting customers. Now, this is competition, and there's nothing latent, but it stops short of conflict because no coercion is present, and the situation is governed by moral norms. When competition is latent, the person is often unaware of it. Now, this lady, decked out in her new hat, is unconsciously competing with all other women for attention, and she gets it too. Competition need not be only for selfish ends. In the local community chest campaign, various groups and individuals compete with each other to see who can give the most and reach 100% of their quotas. But most competition is not for altruistic ends. The more usual kind can lead into something quite different and another social process, conflict.
What's the big idea? That was my fare.
Who said so? It's a free country, ain't it?
Not that free. This is the second time you pull this, you big jerk.
Say that again.
You're a big jerk and you always have been.
Obviously, what started out as competition has now become conflict. The deliberate attempt of one person to oppose, resist, or coerce the will of another. But conflicts are not only personal, they can be corporate too. There is a strike at one of the factories in town. Here is an example of corporate conflict. One group, labor, is in conflict with another group, management. When the opposing groups are nations, war may result. But if competition and conflict were the only forms of social interaction, society as we know it would collapse. There must also be cooperation. Cooperation varies in degree and quality. For convenience, we call it either primary, secondary, or tertiary cooperation. Family living offers a good example of primary cooperation. The aims and interests of the group and the individual tend to fuse and become one. Work is often shared, and there is a close feeling of identification among the members. Secondary cooperation is more characteristic of modern society. It exists, for example, in the average business office. When the executive mislays an important paper, he asks his secretary's help in finding it. In a situation like this, people work together cooperatively, but everyone is primarily interested in personal gain. The secretary works for the salary she receives, and the executive works for greater profits for the company he owns. But cooperation, regardless of degree, is not just a rare sociological phenomenon. It is a constant necessity. The sales manager and the advertising manager of this company are competing for a promotion on the executive staff. But in spite of their conscious rivalry, they still cooperate with each other at work because their jobs are interrelated and dependent on each other. Tertiary cooperation, usually called accommodation, is of a still different nature. In another factory in town, the workers are not on strike, and production is going ahead smoothly. But underneath this cooperation, there is latent conflict which could become overt in a strike. Management is interested in increasing production and in holding down costs, the foremost of which is wages. Labor, on the other hand, is interested primarily in increasing wages. Latent conflict is present, and consequently, this kind of cooperation is an insecure working together with a strongly opportunistic flavor. Cooperation is especially a social necessity with a group during times of corporate conflict, such as wars or strikes. The union leaders who represent the workers on strike in the other factory in town are holding an emergency meeting, and two of these men happen to be the opposing candidates for president of the union in the coming election. But their rivalry is forgotten for the moment, and they are cooperating with each other during this period of corporate conflict with management. But the necessity for cooperation is not just sociological. It is psychological too, part of the individual's inner and emotional structure. From the time a child is born into our society, he begins to learn the necessity for cooperation. Early in life, a child learns that cooperation is a condition for receiving love and approval from his parents, and outside his home, for being an accepted member of his group. People in love don't usually think of themselves in terms of social process, which is probably just as well. But actually, they illustrate all three kinds of process at one time or another. Conflict, the deliberate attempt to oppose, resist, or coerce the will of another person. It's happening here, all right. Competition, men compete for the same woman, and women compete for the same man. In fact, people in love often compete with each other to prove who loves the most. But in this area of human activity, as in all the others, there is also cooperation. Competition, conflict, cooperation. These are the processes which take place in social interaction, everywhere that human society exists.
That's so great. I love sociology films. Actually I didn't need to, but I took a couple of sociology classes in college as electives just because I was fascinated by it. Somebody asked about why Roman numerals for the copyright. And I asked that question at a film archivist conference, and I got some guesses why, instead of using Arabic numbers, normal numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, through 0, why Roman numerals. And the reason why some people supposed was because those were still considered valid when it came to a copyright registration, and it obscured the year for the average person. A lot of people didn't know how to read Roman numerals, so if they were like opening up a book and they looked at the copyright and they saw like, well, this book is 20 years old, or this book is 50 years old, they might pause and say like, well, this isn't current. The same with film. A film would be released and it would have the copyright symbol. And if someone said, well, this came out like 4 years ago, this is not a new film. So that's one of the theories of why they went with Roman numerals sometimes as a way to obfuscate. Because somebody would make a work, like a book, like a film, and would want it to last a while in most cases, whereas the public was always wanting something new. And so some people would be like, not into that. All right, so today was an interesting day. I got contacted by the Petridge Farm archivist. Actually, they're the archivist for a lot of the brands. I think owned by Campbell's. Campbell's owns a lot of these different brands. Anyways, so the archivist had found a clip that I had of a bunch of astronauts on the space shuttle with goldfish crackers. And he said, I've never seen this footage before, and I'm wondering when this is from. That we have noted that the first time the goldfish crackers were in space, in orbit, was 1988. So I looked at the clip and did some research, and it was from a post reel of God, my brain just phased out. Mike, thank you for the coffee, by the way. It was from a post-flight press conference for STS-26, and so I've got it here, the actual video, and so we can watch it. And this is something that NASA did every time they would do a space a shuttle flight. They would do a post kind of recap. They would have a bunch of A-roll, B-roll, and kind of show what they did during that mission. So the highlights of the mission. And so there's some really great stuff there, and there's also some goofy stuff. So here we go.
Welcome to the Johnson Space Center for the STS-26 post-flight crew press conference. I'm very pleased to introduce Discovery crew, led by Captain Rick Houck.
Thanks for coming here today. We sure enjoyed that mission, and we were very pleased to see from the smiles on people's faces when we got back here that just about everybody did. I think it was a great shot in the arm for the agency, and as best I can determine, it was also a good one for the country. We're sure pleased to be the most visible part of that great team effort that involved tens of thousands of people. And to start, we'd like to acknowledge publicly how much we appreciated all the work that went into making this mission such a success. And there are just many, many, many thousands of people out there that put their hearts into it, and it's very gratifying to come back with being able to say that the mission was as successful as it was. Of course, my crew here with me at the table today, Dick Covey, Dave Hilmers, Mike Lounge, and Pinky Nelson. We'd like to get right into the movie. So, Jeff, we can turn down the house lights. We'll go into the movie. This is what it really was all about. Here is the ending of a beautiful mission and bringing the United States back into the manned spaceflight program, and we were very proud to represent the country and to be part of the team. Here we are at Suit Up the morning before we launched. We really didn't think we were going to go. We knew that the winds were such that our pre-programmed profile might cause some problems with the structure, but we said, well, we'll suit up anyhow, and who knows, maybe the winds will get better. There were a large number of folks down there at the Cape. Here are some of them. We certainly appreciated, and I think we could almost palpably feel the support that we had.
Took a great effort on the part of the mission management team to come to all the right decisions, which allowed us to launch on this day, and then some very excellent execution of the flow and the count by the launch control team to get us off on the day that we said we were going to, and not too long after the time we said we were going to go. No matter how many times you ride this rocket, you're always a bit taken back by the ignition of the solid rocket motors. It's quite a ride, as you can expect. This is shown in half speed, which makes it take a lot longer than what it really did, but
before came in overhead the Edwards Lake bed and made our 300-mile-an-hour descent to a morning before we launched. We really didn't think we were going to go. We knew that the winds were support that we had.
Took a great effort on the part of the mission management team to come to all the right decisions, which allowed us to launch on this day, and then some very excellent execution of the flow and the count by the launch control team to get us off on the day that we said we were going to, and not too long after the time we said we were going to go. No matter how many times you ride this rocket, you're always a bit taken back by the ignition of the solid rocket motors. It's quite a ride, as you can expect. This is shown in half speed, which makes it take a lot longer than what it really did, but maybe that's kind of what was going through our minds as we rode through first stage. It seemed like it took a lot longer than it ever did in training. We understand there were a lot of very excited people on the ground when we got off the pad, and then they re-emphasized their excitement once we got to the 2-minute point and the solid rocket boosters separated. Obviously, the first part of the flight, the ride on the solid rocket motors, was a very critical one for this mission. Much of the redesign effort that had gone into the space shuttle program had been centered around those boosters, and all indications are to date that those boosters performed exceptionally well. We're interested in the follow-up teardown of the boosters to find out if indeed there are any other deficiencies that we need to look at.
Here you see one of the 65 sunrises that we saw during the 4-day mission. Here we have the payload bay doors open, and that's the first thing we did once safely in orbit, and got busy preparing the TDRS satellite for its deployment from the payload bay. There's Rick at the commander's seat reading a checklist, talking to the ground there on the handheld microphone. Dick going through his checklist, making sure the orbiter is go for deployment, making sure everything was ready. Dave Hilmers back at the payload station, checking the CRT, making sure all the parameters are okay, and controlling the switches that release the mechanisms that hold the payload in the payload bay. It's tilted up here at about 50 degrees prior to deployment from the payload bay. The TDRS tracking and data relay satellite there, the black shape with the booster rocket underneath it. Here I am at the panel on the aft flight deck that had all the switch controls for the tilt-up mechanism, the ordnance arming functions, and the actual switch that you throw to fire pyrotechnic devices that cause the payload to separate from its structure, support structure. When you do that, when I did that, push-off springs activate and push that whole 20-ton stack slowly out of the payload bay at about a half a foot per second.
The whole sequence worked as it was advertised. It had 2 solid rocket burns that got it to geosynchronous altitude, which was its target, within a very precise window. Here's Pinky taking documentation of the deploy, and Rick performing the maneuver to back away from the satellite about 1 minute after deployment. We've heard that the checkout of the satellite is going extremely well. It's about 1/3 of the way into the checkout right now. In fact, this afternoon, a maneuver is going to be completed to stop the drift to the west, and there it will be checked out some more. All the systems seem to be go right now, including the KU band antenna.
A marvelously complex machine that requires coordination of a lot of different organizations to make it work, from the booster through the TDRS upper stage and the flight controllers.
Well, with the satellite out, we got busy on a number of mid-deck experiments we had. This is the protein crystal growth, where we're growing crystals for biomedical samples for research ranging from AIDS to cancer research and a lot in between, a pretty complex experiment.
Another experiment we carried was a student experiment sponsored by Mr. Bruce Lloyd. The idea here was to heat up some titanium wires that are encapsulated in these vacuum tubes beyond their phase transition point to see if on resolidifying the crystal structure is different than might be obtained on Earth, the goal being to develop stronger and more pure samples of that titanium.
We carried 2 different student experiments on board. This is the second one that grew some crystals of lead acetate, crystals that grow to a fairly large size in a short time. Was activated by mixing 2 fluids together, and then right before our eyes we could watch these huge crystals grow. They will be analyzed once they got back on the ground to see if there are any differences between those and earthbound ones.
Here I'm setting up a phase partitioning experiment. Phase partitioning is a method for separating biomedical cells by using 2 different types of liquids. We had a container with 18 chambers that we documented the demixing characteristics of the different types of liquids.
Another engineering evaluation or test that we did was taking pictures of the Earth's limb at sunrise and sunset to measure exactly what the brightness was so that sensors could be built for future satellites.
After the primary payload had been deployed, and we spent much of our time accomplishing Earth observation photography. Now, during the course of our mission, we took over 1,800 70 millimeter photographs of the Earth. We also had about 4,000 feet of 16 millimeter film that we took, much of which was out the window, as you see here, coming across the Middle East. This is always a very important part of our flights to the crew members, because we not only get to look out the window, but we get to document what we see. It turns out that during the course of our flight, it was an unusually clear period across the northern hemisphere, according to those people that are used to looking at space photography. And they're very excited about the photographs that we took. And they've even said that there are things that we've taken pictures of that they haven't seen before, or it's been a long time since they've had a good photograph of them. This data that comes from these photographs is used by a wide spectrum of people, geologists, oceanographers, people who study agricultural trends such as the burning of the equatorial jungles, and people who look at our atmosphere and try to ascertain changes in the atmosphere. Those people are quite excited about what we've seen on these photographs, as they have been on previous space flights. This was an exceptionally good pass over the Hawaiian Islands. We had many opportunities to photograph Hawaii, primarily because of the lighting and the time of day that we launched. We probably saw more of it than we did of the other parts of the United States. The equipment that we use is primarily for Earth observations is a Hasselblad 70 millimeter camera, which you saw Mike there with 50, 100, and 250 millimeter lenses. Volcanology is one of the areas that we're always interested in, photographing from space. This is a pass over to Canary Islands off of the west coast of Africa. They happen to be very clear many of the days that we passed over them. We also had several different attitudes that we had the orbiter in, which let us get this particular, one of those attitudes let us get this pass over the Himalayan mountains looking up into China. This was when the orbiter's nose was pointed to the south.
Here's a shot of mealtime. Meals are always enjoyable. As a social event, we play with our food a little bit like we're supposed to. And just get a chance to discuss what's gone on that day and what's planned for the next day. Here's a target practice with an M&M that's out there in the middle, and I think it's a bullseye. It must have been a fluke because the next shot misses by 3 inches here.
We do carry up with us some photographs of our families. You see them on the lockers to the left. We also, during a period, during one day, take some pictures next to some stickers from our alma mater and so on. But you can see we keep a pretty clean cabin.
In the back, you can see the sleep stations that Mike and I used.
Had our own fish bowl here.
We had eaten most of the fish by this time.
Yes.
Sometimes you've got to unwind the commander a little bit.
This was entry day. You see us wearing the gray underwear that goes under the orange suits. We were inspired. I was inspired to try a little pommel horse routine using the treadmill there. I didn't find this so hard at all. I don't know why it's such a
Wasn't
big
that
deal.
pretty either, Mike? However, the judges did vote and gave
They were
him...
fairly generous.
It's the zero-G Olympics.
We did want to communicate, particularly to the youth of the country, that we really, space is a fun place. And even though we went through a terrible tragedy several years ago, we still want to communicate that there are some things up there that are unique. We want to really inspire the youngsters to take an interest.
Prior to entry, you've got to get the suits back on again and the seats set up and strapped in. After the luxury of being in a shirt-sleeve environment for 4 days, it's kind of hard for us to crawl back into these things. It hurts just to watch it. But these are the suits that we wore then, both during the launch and during the entry. Turns out to be not much different getting into them on the ground. You can see the pole strapped to the ceiling.
Well, this is a sunset taken out the window before we close the payload bay doors, just to transition into the deorbit and landing phase. It's always beautiful as we fade from bright sunlight to darkness. And this is real time. We crossed the western coast between LA and Santa Barbara. It was a beautiful day at Edwards, and as we have done many times before, came in overhead the Edwards Lake bed and made our 300-mile-an-hour descent to a flare at about 2,000 feet above the earth, and then Dick Covey, the pilot, did what every good pilot should do, and that is lower the landing gear when we ask, and came down to a touchdown at around 190 knots, about 200 miles an hour. The machine was absolutely superb in performance, cleanliness. We had a few system problems that we had backups to, but at touchdown, wheel stop, we could look back on a flight that was, as far as I'm concerned, picture perfect, and could not have been better for the country in getting us back into manned spaceflight business. Our patch that we love so much, that symbolizes so many things to us.
So, I don't know if you saw the goldfish crackers in there in the Ziploc bag, but there you go. And also, I'm going to reiterate, we landed on the moon, and that's a fact, and I don't care what Joe Rogan, what guests he has on. He's interested in having interesting, provocative guests, but he doesn't do him and his producer producers don't do a really good job of vetting. And if you dig not even like just a little bit into their experts, you see problems. You see a lot of problems. So, sorry. And if this moon landing denial keeps happening, I might just show all the NASA material that I have. 700 hours of NASA material. And I will just burn through. You guys will be exhausted denying everything that you see. So, this next film is actually on the telecine. And so let me swip over to that. And this is a very odd film. Oops. Very odd. This is Octopuff and Kumquat. Again, the software is messing up, and this is very frustrating. There it is. Alright, let me rewind. Alright, here we go.
Our skies are much bluer than blue. Our doom is a dewier doom. This is the land where we want to be. Our world is clean and free. Oh, this is the way we live in Kumquat.
Ooh, that looks like a nice little place. Think I'll just head on down there and see what it's like.
What's that? What's what? That up in the sky. Whatever it is, it's coming this way. Maybe it's invading Kumquat. Do something, somebody. We're being attacked. Help! The king, get the king.
Oh, good morning. Yes, nice to see you. I guess you wonder who I am. Perhaps you think I'm Pam or Slam, or maybe I'm just who or what. Maybe you wonder what I've got. Well, what I've got is lots of stuff. But first, my name. Let me introduce myself. I'm Octopuff.
Look here now, with your bamming and slamming and smoking and choking, polluting all Kumquat and laughing and joking. As king of Kumquat, I say it's enough, whoever you are. Did you say Octopuff?
At your Majesty's service. Don't get nervous. Would you like to try one of these, Your Majesty?
What do you call this thing?
Why, that, Your Majesty, is a cigarette.
A cigarette.
Right.
Why, this is just burning. Right mind would breathe this into his lungs.
Ah. Oh, there's nothing like a little smoke to make a man feel bright. Just take a puff and soon enough, everything seems right. Cigarettes, cigars, and pipes. Smoke up, smoke up. Don't be a scared old rabbit. It's a little hard at first, but soon, you'll have the habit.
That octopus, it's all his fault. He's spoiling our kingdom with his choky smoke. My daddy's smoking all the time, and coughing all the time, too. It's hard to breathe when they smoke. My whole house smells yucky. I tried to get my mom and dad to stop smoking, but they just got angry. I know. They just think we're nagging them.
Oh, good morning.
We've got to get rid of him. But how can we do it? Wait, I've got it. Look, first we... There he is.
What's that?
Octopus.
Who are you?
Octopus. Octopus. We are the ghosts of kumquat, and we hate smoke. Smoking is choking, makes us cough and wheeze. Take all your cigarettes and beat it if you please.
But I want to stay. Oh, please let me. I like it here. Please.
You can stay here in kumquat on one condition.
Anything. Just name it.
You have to give up smoking.
But if I can't smoke, what will I breathe?
Try a little fresh air. It's great.
No, not fresh air. I heard it's dangerous to your health. It's... Hey, let me have that. Not bad. Not bad.
Smell this flower.
No, I... Say, well, this stuff is all right.
Have a kumquat.
Very good. How come they never tasted that good before?
Everything tastes better when you stop smoking.
Oh, that's so.
And tomorrow morning, you've got to get rid of all the smoke.
How can I do that?
Don't worry, we'll help.
But you're just a bunch of ghosts.
Oh, no, we're not.
It's time to kick the habit.
Try a kumquat. Remember how good they taste? Try some flowers instead.
Try some fresh air instead.
I remember now. That's fresh air.
I'd almost forgotten.
Oh, at last, my people have come to their senses again.
Each of us has a share. Each of us must prove that he cares. This is the land where we want to be. Our world is clean and free. The whole thing
us will ever smoke. No more hack and no more choke. The whole thing's up to you and me. It's a matter of life and breath.
Yeah, so that was interesting because I used to work in an office building next to North Carolina's American Lung Association, which was across the street from a high school in Raleigh. And kids would routinely go and smoke in the patio, which we both shared. And at some point I talked to the American Lung Association people and I said, hey, I mean, you've got underage smokers outside. Isn't that something that you guys used to campaign against? And they said, well, in North Carolina, we're more about tuberculosis. It's like, oh my God. It's like, all right, well, I guess that's what happens in a tobacco state. But anyways, I liked Octopus. Octopuff was kind of that stranger that showed up, kind of similar to Mark Twain's Dangerous Stranger and the guy that shows up in the Sneetches film. Oops. And so that reminded me of Sid Davis. Sid Davis did many films about dangerous strangers. And this is the first one that he did. It's missing the beginning, and it had some shrinkage issues, so the sound is kind of weird. But here we go. Dangerous Stranger. Already in progress.
Good friend of kids, if I do say so. And I sure wouldn't want them to get into any trouble. Any more than your parents would want any... You've heard your mother or others talking or seen in the news about things that happen to other little boys and girls, haven't you? You know, how they went away with strangers and their mothers and fathers. The wise guy. He knows it all. Remember, the kids who get in trouble with strangers are those who forget what they've been told, and the ones who think they know more than their parents and teachers. Doesn't happen to us. Remember the story about the little girl in the paper? Hello, little lady. All alone, aren't you? Wouldn't you like to go for a ride with me? I'll buy you some ice cream. Well, nobody ever saw her again. It was in the headlines and on the radio. You probably heard it.
The police believe she was kidnapped. They have no clues to the identity of the stranger in the shabby car. Nobody thought to take the license number of the car. And if you see any little...
That's the way it happened. And just look at how sad it made her mother and father. I had to tell them about it. All because she forgot what they had told her about strangers. Now let's look at some of the places and some of the ways you might run into trouble. Let's see what we should do if anything happens. Here's one, a lonely alley. It'd be dumb for anybody to try to harm you with a lot of other kids around, wouldn't it? And what kind of a kid would a man like that look for? That's right. A wise guy. Like Jimmy here, who thinks he knows everything. Maybe he won't get into any trouble, but he's sure taking a chance. I don't think it's worth it. Do you? Now, here's a place you always meet a lot of friends, like the cowboy up on the screen, and the manager. What if somebody says hello to you or smiles? Well, that's all right. Most everybody likes kids, whether they're strangers or whether they know you. But watch this man. He followed the little girl into the theater. He isn't just an ordinary stranger who likes kids. He might make trouble. Watch. See how he put his arm around her? You should never let anybody do that except your own family. No stranger. Thank goodness this little girl is smart. She changed her seat. Just what her parents told her to do. That's exactly what you should do. The man followed her. So what'll she do now? That's right. Get the usher. If this should ever happen to you, do the same thing. The usher will make sure none of the kids is ever bothered by that man again. You see how it works? If you just remember what you've been told and don't be a wise guy, it's easy to stay out of trouble. For instance, in a place like this park. This little girl's mother told her never to take candy from strangers. Well, she forgot. But her brother didn't. He started to yell, and the man ran away. He was afraid of policemen. Remember that, kids. It's a good trick.
Hello, Sally. I'm a friend of your mother's. She sent me to bring you home. Come on.
Now, Sally's mother told her never to ride home with a stranger. But Sally forgot, too. It was only because her friend here was smart and took the license number that Sally ever got home. Well, we've seen some dumb bunnies so far, haven't we? But these are the dumbest of all, the hitchhikers. Why? Well, even if the driver doesn't mean any harm, and you're just plain lucky if he doesn't, he may be a reckless driver or a speeder. His car might have bad brakes. The hitchhiker doesn't know. He just goes right along anyway. Well, these kids aren't going to be so lucky. Too bad. They asked for trouble and they're getting it. But thank goodness one of the boys kept his head. He took the license number of the car. And another boy saw a squad car coming down the next street. Maybe the little girl can still be rescued. If they can get the radio alarm out quick enough. Just think, if they hadn't been hitching rides, this needn't have happened at all. But that doesn't help much now, does it? That's lucky. 2 motorcycle policemen got the alarm. And there they go, after him. Just remember, whether you're a boy or a girl, that might be you in that car if you hitch rides. Look at that, they got him. This little girl is very, very lucky. Who knows what might have happened if one boy hadn't been smart enough to take the license number? Isn't it silly to worry your parents and take chances like that? Well, gang, what have we learned from all this? Maybe Dodo here can show us. He does everything wrong. If Dodo meets a stranger in a lonely alley, he just goes right along with him. Or at the movies, Dodo's friends with anybody, stranger or not. Isn't that dumb? Sure, her parents tell her not to, but Miss Dodo thinks she's smart. She thinks they don't know what they're talking about. Do you know what a dodo is? A dodo is an extinct bird. That means it isn't alive anymore. That's the way this dodo's going to be, extinct, taking all those chances. Well, who do you want to be like, kids? A dumb dodo or a really smart kid? Well, that was about what I had to tell you. Just remember those two things, to do what your parents and teachers tell you, and to be a really smart kid, not a dumb dodo. If you do, it'll be pretty hard to get into any trouble. Well, kids, I'll be seeing you.
So, Sid Davis, that was his first film made in 1950, and he just ended up making that film over and over and over again. He made Danger Stranger at least one other time, updated it, it was in color, but he also came up with other variations on it, and kind of dug deeper in some aspects of it. But this is all because his... basically, at some point, there was a child kidnapping case where the child was killed, and he just kind of asked his daughter about some basic things about strangers and found that she was woefully uneducated about the dangers of strangers. And so he raised some money, including money from John Wayne, who he was working with as a stand-in, and basically made this film. And then it was successful enough that he just kept remaking it and kept updating it and changing it. One of his most infamous films, of course, is Boys Beware, which talks about homosexuals. And what's interesting is he actually, in the 70s, came up with another film called Pedophile, where they kind of recant, they kind of pull back and say, it's like, well, it's not homosexuals, it's actually these specific types of pedophiles that are... in trying to clarify that homosexuality does not mean that they're a threat to children. So, anyways, so there's Sid Davis for you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. I hope that you had a good day, and I hope that you have a good rest of the day, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Everybody, take care, and we'll talk to you soon.